Listen, Judge O'Brien, the truth.
Yeah, he came with it. Ooh, he delivering the heat.
Haired, blue-eyed, and she was born in Jamaica because her aristocratic parents just happened to be over there, and they were born when their aristocratic English nobility parents were born into place.
Talking about Kamala.
So
Yeah.
it's an interesting thing when you see that, and it's St. Elizabeth Parish where all of the high, bright, and white Jamaicans are, and it's an interesting little hookup. So we get an international thing, but there is a family situation that gets in here. And Kamala's folk were trying to get in on it through the mother because they were Hindu. Now, the dad said his background is Irish and also from India, the Hindu thing, and he became a Marxist because that was what was going on back when he was coming of age in the early 1960s. Now, when you get this in place, you run into the fact that there are family situations. Now, when I was in Hollywood, I made a whole lot of money. I had places all over the country, and I had 2 places in Aspen, Colorado. So my ex was a social climber, and she was a ski instructor up in Aspen, of all things. So everybody wanted to go skiing with Mrs. Brown in the backcountry. So we wound up meeting billionaires and really multi-millionaires. And it's interesting because there are these family connections that are not obvious, except when you walk around Aspen. It's awful. Everybody starts at 6'1" for the females and gets up to these guys that all look like Adonis that are these great athletes. You know, it's like, damn, man, they've been breeding, smart and, good looking and athletic. And they all have these interesting relationships with each other that aren't obvious and that they don't make public. You had, starting with the Adams family, you had President Adams and his son, President Adams. You had the Roosevelts, Teddy Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. You had the Kennedys, and then they had muscle because Joe Kennedy Sr. was a gangster. He was a bootlegger, and he used
That's how they established Hollywood, by the way. It was a bunch of gang members that established Hollywood. The bootleggers went in there.
Wow.
Carnies.
Yeah, I'll tell you some stuff off the record about that. So it's like you get this whole thing, and then you get the Bushes in here, and then you have the Clintons who are newbies into this whole thing, and now you have some other stuff that's going on, these peripherals.
Well, it's funny you say that the Clintons are newbies, though, because even like Bill Clinton has like a weird story. Like his dad was killed in a car accident when he was like 2. It's like once you start looking into their genealogy, they all kind of have like these weird, tragic stories, and then they're just kind of become the president. And I'm like, okay,
Yes.
well,
Wow.
I talk about a lot of people who have like don't have a dad. Like they don't really go on to like go to Harvard and Yale and become president. So it's like, it just makes you wonder, like, what is actually happening here?
And then you find something else. Look at Barack Obama. What kind of connection does Barack Obama or Barry Soetoro have with the United States? He's got a long history through his mother's side of the family. They were slave owners, and 2 of his ancestors were Confederate officers during the Civil War.
Wow.
One even rode with Cantrell, the guerrilla up in Kansas and Missouri. He's got a connection. But even if you get away from whether or not Kamala is black, what connection does she have with the United States? Probably the least out of any candidate for president in this country's history. So you have a situation where her parents have academic visas. They're transitory. They have no intention of being permanent residents or citizens. It's passing through. And she lies a lot about it, but you've seen that, when she got to Canada, how old she was, and that's her background.
Graduated from high school, wealthy, Canadian.
The whole 9 yards.
Middle class
and
family, she says.
doesn't have that American vibe where you from elementary school are taught about what this country's supposed to be about.
Exactly.
You have this thing where it's part of the Commonwealth, so they're subjects.
Yeah.
Now, you probably have talked to your husband about that, and your father-in-law, the Earl, and you know, they view this whole thing about being subjects in a different way than we here in the States view about being a citizen.
It's very different. Across the pond is very different.
Very different, but that's the background with Kamala, the way she was brought up. And you get the feeling that somebody is trying to become part of something, but they don't want anybody with any real connection. The more isolated they are, the more they're subject to convenient control. You know, today is tomorrow, which is why yesterday is tomorrow too, which is why we all, you know, that word salad nonsense, which is you got a silly somebody that's lazy. It's not the brightest bulb on the shelf and is easily manipulated because somebody has done what in Hollywood they call the casting couch routine to get where they are. But at some point, if you get to the top with the casting couch, the problem is that there's nobody to sleep with after a certain point. You have to have the raw talent.
That's
and
right.
If you don't have the talent, then you're not going to do anything much. And that's what our problem is. It's who is behind her and
the
who
question.
is...
Yeah, that's what concerns me, is that she comes across to me like an empty vessel, and it was interesting to read. You know, I'm not saying, obviously, that everything this journalist wrote was real, but I do take his points about her mother being a government agent quite seriously because of just, he says, even in her demeanor, because then when I spoke to Kamala's family members, they said, far from this depiction that she has of this, you know, warm, fluffy upbringing, that actually her mother was quite militant with her. And if we're thinking that she was involved with the government and MK Ultra, you're talking about psychological conditioning, that Kamala has been psychologically conditioned since her youth.
Wow.
And what's really stunning, and this is kind of what became a big question in my mind, is as she creates this book of this work of fiction as a way to blackify herself, to make black people think that she, you know, spent so much time in Harlem and she was around black aunties and black uncles. And the thing that is stunning to me is it wasn't necessary, right? You can run as a white person, you can run as an Indian. Vivek just ran as an Indian. Hillary Clinton
cares?
almost
Right.
won, you know, as running as a woman,
That's
lost
right.
twice. But the point is that, like, you're allowed to be white and run. We don't have an issue with a white person becoming president of the
Exactly.
United States. Joe Biden was just the president of the United States. So what specifically was the reason, and this is where I had to get to, that they worked so hard to blackify her, to completely ignore her plenty of white relatives? And that's what makes me think it's got to be a pretty big secret. You know what I mean? They're trying to basically obscure her true lineage in a way that if you're thinking she's black, your brain's not even processing that she might be related to like a Hillary or somebody else. So that really stands out to me, is how
you're getting
unnecessary
there.
the blackification was. I'm coming up with this word here, blackification, but it's a bit weird.
You're getting there. See, and the other thing is, vote black if you're black, so you don't deal with the qualifications. You just vote.
Yeah,
Skin is kin.
So
But the
stupid.
problem is,
But
she's
they voted for Joe
lying
Biden, he
about
can't even
that.
speak.
But the other problem is, and I don't have anything against it, you're supposed to vote for her because she's black, but she's got a white husband.
Yeah, and that's
So
what.
the bottom line is if she can sleep with the white husband, then you can vote for a white man for president
Exactly.
without any feelings of guilt.
Exactly.
So they're trying to rely on, you got to be this, that, and the other. And one of the things that gets me is this conditioning thing. 50 years worth of propaganda to prepare for where you're going right now
That's
with
right.
this rainbow cult they're trying to impose as sort of an official cult or faith for the country.
Listen.
You also have something else going on. The Democratic Party was founded in the second decade of the 19th century for the purpose of protecting and spreading slavery. It perfected the art of enslavement. And one of the things that I found most scary about this, I worked for a D.C. think tank more than a half century ago, and we studied this. And I remember having to read the slave pamphlets that were on microfilm in the Library of Congress. And one of the secrets to the enslavement process was put the elements of slavery into the Negroes' culture so they would teach slavery to themselves without realizing it. So what's happening is this party...
That is like so... I mean, come on.
That's deep.
It is deep.
That's deep.
He's sitting here telling you, they're explaining to you the whole history behind her and what we don't know, and how he even goes further back with other presidents, and how some of them are even related, and you don't even know that because they don't broadcast it. Now, that's what's deep to me.
You start wondering how these people get presidential and this presidential assignment spaces so easily. Why did they just fit this presidential in there and there? No, it's bigger than you and me.
It is. Wow, this is deep. We're wrapping this thing up, but it just makes so much sense that we start there and listen to this piece here. This is just it.
Of the slave masters that put this process in place has used it for something else. They don't grow cotton anymore. But there's a plantation, but they make rainbows on this plantation, and they evoke the elements of the slave culture that are in place to get the Negroes to vote for them without thinking about it. And the person they put in becomes most vulnerable to being isolated. Hillary Clinton, for example, came from a very interesting family, Rodmans. They were staunch Republicans. She was a cheerleader for Goldwater, one of the Goldwater girls.
I don't know what that is.
Chairwoman of the Young Republican chapter at Wesley All-Girls University for 3 years.
Wow.
As a Republican until she met Bill Clinton.
Wow.
So then she switches over. But I find that very interesting for somebody to be saying it's okay for Hillary to flip-flop on the parties, but Hillary was always a wannabe. And her parents were very much middle class, and she wanted to get outside of that. And she had a history of really downing her husband, Bill Clinton, because of his low origins. But Clinton was a smart man. And she was somebody that was isolated because she had no real connections to anything. So she became somebody that was subject to manipulation. You also have Kamala, which, by the way, is the name of a Hindu goddess, and it's not a black name.
Nope.
It's a Hindu name.
Yep.
People better wake up.
And you've got her, she's isolated because who are her relatives?
Sorry. Not my chair.
You know one of her relatives by marriage. His name is Jesse Smollett. The one that got caught up with that fraud thing. He's her nephew by marriage.
That's
wow.
Okay? You get this little picture of family connection and the noose around the neck. And by the way,
This is crazy.
I interviewed several Chicago detectives and police on that, and I happen to know one that's a cop. He's back in the DMV area now. And Jesse and the bunch had been planning this for months, and they used to discuss it at this particular athletic around his own neck. And he had met with Kamala just before that, and she and Cory Booker, this is the same day when he flew into Chicago, they had been working on something that Conyers came up with in 1997 that is now modified and introduced as the Emmett Till anti-lynch bill.
Wow.
Remember the neck?
Yes.
And the whole thing, they went off and then they had to withdraw it because of the fraud that came out.
Okay, so we could just stop it and take that part out. But
So
I
it's-
just,
it's
I mean, what enlightening information.
Bigger game.
I mean, when I heard that, I was like, oh my gosh. So it really makes sense. If you go back and just rewind all the presidencies, well, not all of them, but go back and rewind when Biden was in there, what has taken place since he's been in, what took place when Trump was in office, all that stuff that was going on, how they tried to defame his character, and how they was just all trying to blast him based off what he was trying to do for us in America as a country. And then before he got in, what the Obamas were doing, his 2 terms, go back and look at it all.
Yeah.
It's like it makes so much sense, but you have to have a clear understanding and be willing to accept and receive the information. That's a lot of history he just gave.
Yes, it is. I mean,
and this would have never come up if Janet Jackson hadn't made the comment that she made. That is what ensued Candace to go and dig deeper.
I know people be wondering. So I know if I wonder, y'all wonder how certain people get put in position, how you just come from, how did these people are your leaders? Like, how did they just be groomed just to be your leaders? Because it's deeper than we think it is. So
wow, this was good. This is a true eye-opener. And if you all want to see the rest, go back and look at it from the beginning. Check out Candace's channel. This is a great
That's
interview. Right. It is very informative. And you can also fact-check and do your own research.
2024, be more.
Talk less.
We'll see you on the next one.
Subscribe to the channel.
Bye.